Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today with another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on the NBA offseason, and specifically who I think are the major winners and losers of the NBA offseason. So this is going to be incorporating draft, trades, and free agency. And I didn't want to do just a free agency video, I didn't want to do just a draft video, and I didn't want to do just a video about trades because I think it's cooler or just more of a bigger picture, more holistic to do a video of all off-season moves, because like let's say you look at the Timberwolves and you say, well, they didn't do anything in free agency, but they traded for Rubio, they traded for Ed Davis, they acquired Anthony Edwards in the draft, so they did a lot of moves, but just not in free agency. And same with a lot of other teams, like the Thunder did tons of trades, but no significant draft pieces or free agents coming in, but they made tons and tons of trades. So it's not really fair to judge them on one aspect, but not the other ones. So with that out of the way, I'll go through winners and losers. I'll talk about all the big movers and shakers this offseason, and whether I think that they are a winner, a loser, or basically nothing really changed, or it's too little of an impact to really matter. And the first one I'm actually going to talk about is the Milwaukee Bucks, who I think are really not a winner or a loser, to be frank. And I think a lot of people put them definitively in the winner category. To me, they swapped out Wes Matthews and Marvin Williams and Kyle Korver and Robin Lopez for basically Bobby Portis, Torrey Craig, DJ Augustine, just kind of a handful of decent, average role player kind of guys. And then obviously the big move is trading George Hill, Bledsoe, 3 picks and 2 swaps for Drew Holiday. I'll just say this. I think that the trade is a really big overpay, and I think Drew Holiday is a really good player, but I don't think he's worth that. And if we're being frank, you know, right in the regular season, Eric Bledsoe is 80% of what Drew Holiday is. So, like, just statistically looking at him, what Drew Holiday puts up around 16 to 18 points in the regular season, and Bledsoe puts up around 15 to 17, so he's basically matching him there. Relatively similar efficiencies, pretty similar, honestly, if we're being frank. Neither is like a significantly better shooter than the other or anything like that. Drew Holiday plays all defensive team level defense, but so does Eric Bledsoe. Holiday's a better defender, but Bledsoe is not bad by any means. He is really good and all defensive caliber for that side of the ball. So it's not like he is a huge significant upgrade getting Holiday over Bledsoe on the defensive end, in my opinion. What you're really paying for is the playoffs. Bledsoe has been a notorious bad playoff performer, and you're hoping that Holiday will be better in the playoffs as he was in 2018 versus the Blazers. Also, Holiday is taller, so he can guard more positions besides just point guard, so you're paying for that. And then, Holiday, the thing that I'm not totally sold on here is that Holiday's really preferred playing shooting guard the last 3 years or so than point guard, and they're basically forcing him back into the point guard role. So I'm not huge on that. So to me, it's kind of like the Bucks traded a lot and got marginally better for Holiday, and then the free agency moves, I think, kind of even themselves out. The Lakers, I think, definitive winner, probably the biggest winner of free agency. Marc Gasol, bringing him back instead of McGee, essentially, bringing in Montrezl Harrell instead of Dwight, bringing in Wes Matthews to replace Danny Green, bringing in Schroeder basically to replace Rondo, and bringing back KCP and Morris. They basically upgraded on all of those, obviously, besides the dudes who they just brought back. But out of the 4 dudes they swapped out, McGee, Howard, Rondo, and Danny Green, they either stayed the same, Wes Matthews for Danny Green, or they improved like with the other 3. So I think that they definitely got better. Their bench depth is really good now. I think you have like a 10-man roster that you feel really confident with, but rather than like 7 or 8 dudes. So I really like that. Yeah, they're pretty simple. Besides that, let's see here. The Clippers, they're in the same category with the Bucks for me, and you might say that they're a winner too. I'd say for what they needed, which was interior defense and rim protection and playmaking, they didn't address playmaking at all, but they definitely addressed the interior rim protection and defense with bringing in Ibaka instead of Harrell. And he can shoot threes and space the floor, so overall he's a better fit than Harrell for them. So that's a definite upgrade. And then Kennard over Shamet, that's an upgrade too. A marginal one, but a good upgrade. He's a better passer and a better scorer, more well-rounded. He can put the ball on the floor a little bit more and dribble and create his own shot more than Shamet can. And then the only detriment is they bring back Morris at a really hefty price tag for him. They bring him back for $16 million annually for 4 years, which is a pretty big overpay considering his twin brother, who has essentially the same skill set, signed for like near the minimum, and Montrezl Harrell, who is Sixth Man of the Year, signed for like half of what Morris signed for. So he was a pretty big overpay, but oh well. So to me, they're kind of like, they made moves, but overall they stayed relatively the same. Let's see here. Other big movers and shakers. I guess I'll talk the Timberwolves. I think they improved. So I think that they're winners from getting Edwards, but free agency, they re-signed Beasley to a reasonable deal. They traded for Rubio and Ed Davis and essentially traded those two for Spellman, who wasn't even playing for them, and James Johnson, who is essentially just a deadweight contract at this point. So I think that they improved there, and I think that they'll be better this year. So I'll put them like tentatively in the winners category, but they're sort of like the Clippers, where I'm not super sure how much their moves will make a difference, but I think that they'll be significantly better with Cat back too. Let's see here. The losers, as far as a loser, Boston for sure, and it's not super in depth. I just think that they basically swap Thompson for Gordon Hayward. In essence, that's what happened this offseason, and Gordon Hayward's a way better player than Tristan Thompson, so I think that they do get a bit worse. Toronto, I think, is a big loser, and that's gonna surprise people because they think, well, you brought back Van Fleet, you're a winner. But to me, what Van Fleet does for this team is basically the same thing as Norman Powell, and I know people are going to hate me for saying, oh, Van Fleet, he is so much better than Powell, but Van Fleet's super inefficient as a scorer. He shoots like under 40% from the field, basically. And to me, Van Vliet, he's good in big spots, like in the 19 finals, but let's be frank, when Van Vliet has been most impressive is when basically there were no expectations for him. And that was in the finals when we saw him as like a 10-point per game kind of dude, and he was hitting like the clutchest of clutchest shots. And now he's going to be making like $22 million annually or $21 million annually. And he can't be the dude that can regress into 13, 14 points on any given night. The Raptors are paying him like he's going to be a 20-point-a-night kind of scorer, essentially the second best player on this team after Siakam. And so I'm just concerned that he's still like, even last year he was more efficient than the year before, and he was still shooting like 40% from the field. And he's 6 feet tall, and I just feel like there's more mysticism around his name than necessarily he being as good as people think he is. I also think maybe he's elevated in Toronto. And well, okay, all that aside, they kept him, which I thought they needed to do, even though he is an inefficient scorer. He still is the heart of the team, I think, in a lot of ways, and he does a lot of playmaking stuff that's good for them. Besides that, they lose Ibaka and they lose Gasol, who I think are both two really big losses. And I've heard people say, they brought in Alex Len, they brought in Aaron Baines, they brought in Bembry from Atlanta to kind of quell or subdue the losses of Gasol and Ibaka. And on paper, Baines is probably about what Gasol was giving you. And so the real loss is Ibaka. But even besides that, I think Ibaka and Marc Gasol were really, really high IQ players who had this championship level experience. And, Aaron Baines is fine, but when he was making any deep sort of playoff runs with the Celtics, he was playing like 10 minutes a night. And last year with Phoenix, he didn't even play in the bubble when they were playing their most meaningful games. He did have a good year, but it just, I don't think it's enough to replace those two. Alex Len acquisition is meh. Bembry I like, but he probably won't see more than like 15 minutes a night. So to me, like, Toronto's best case scenario was that they brought everybody back. They were never going to improve, though. So they were basically set up to lose this offseason, and I think they did because they lost both Ibaka and Gasol. Let's see here. Other major winners and losers that are sticking out to me. Charlotte, I think, honestly, they're in the same category as the Bucks to me. They bring in Hayward, and I think like next year it'll really pay off, but I'm really concerned for 3 years from now. This signing feels a lot like the Al Horford signing, where like people were really like blown away by it in the moment, and like there were some people that said like, oh my gosh, they got Al Horford, or oh my gosh, the Hornets got Hayward. But who knows, maybe a year from now we're looking at this and we're looking at it the same way we're looking at Al Horford's contract, and we're saying, gosh, in 2024 this dude is going to be making $30 million when he's hobbled and not doing very well anymore. I think the first 2 years or so he'll kind of float around that similar 20 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists on good efficiency. But I mean, by the time the contract's done, he's going to be like 34, I think, or 35, and I don't know how well that's going to hold up. They did score big by getting LaMelo Ball. You know, I think they'll be interesting. I still think they'll be like the 10 seed. I feel like this move pushes them from a ceiling of like 35 wins to a ceiling of like 42 wins, but we'll see. Washington, not really a winner or a loser. They just brought back Bertans. Houston, I think, is actually a very low-key marginal winner. Christian Wood was a good addition. DeMarcus Cousins is like zero risk, tons of reward if it works out. Losing Covington was a head scratcher, but I guess in essence they had to do that to get the money for Christian Wood, so kind of a trade-off. Another big loser is, to me, Denver. They lose Torrey Craig, they lose Plumlee, they lose Grant, and they essentially bring back Paul Millsap, and they lose 3 rotation dudes, and that's it. So like, they bring in JaMychal Green too, who is basically going to play backup center to Jokic. But you know, they're losing. The big losses are going to be Grant and Torrey Craig for wing defense. They basically are going to rely very heavily on Michael Porter Jr. to play big minutes and to not get injured. But he's going to have to play like 34, 35 minutes a night now, I feel like. Or Will Barton's going to have to come back and play a really big role again and play like 30-plus minutes a night. So to me, they're a loser. Other teams I think are losers are just ones that didn't really do anything. So for instance, like Memphis, everybody around them was making big moves, and they didn't really do anything. So to me, they're a loser. Thinking about some other teams, two really quick ones that I think are obvious wins are Portland. They bring in essentially Covington and Cantor, and they're going to lose Whiteside, but they didn't want him back, and they bring back Melo, so those are some big wins. Besides that, Phoenix, loses Aaron Baines, but they bring in Damian Jones, who I think is decent as a backup center. They bring in Chris Paul, obviously, which is a really good acquisition for them. And then I love the Jake Crowder acquisition, so they're a winner. But let me go back to the obvious losers. I think, teams that didn't really do anything in free agency that I think are kind of losers are the Cavaliers. Let's see here. To me, the Pacers, they didn't really have any money, so they're kind of by default a loser. Basically, if you didn't improve, if you stood pat at free agency, you were a loser to me. So like, I think Memphis is, I mentioned them earlier, but they're the best example. They didn't get worse at all, but everybody else in the West basically got better except for Denver. And so by proxy, they got worse. Same with like Sacramento too. Sacramento did nothing this free agency, and so to me, they got worse. The big teams I probably left out so far are Detroit and Atlanta. Detroit, very puzzling. I think they signed like 4 centers. They signed, and then they let Christian Wood go, who a lot of people liked. So you sign Plumlee, you sign Okafor. There's another center I'm not thinking of who they signed, and then they brought in Jeremy Grant for 3 years, $60 million, which isn't. It's a decent contract for him, but he should have gone to a win now team instead of a rebuilding team. He wants to put up like 18 points a night, and that's really not what he should be doing. But hey, he's gonna get paid, and he's happy. Atlanta to me is a huge winner. They bring in Bogdanovich, Rondo, Chris Dunn, and Gallinari. And to me, I just love the idea of a 5-out offensive lineup. And this would be a terrible defensive lineup, but offensively, Trae Young, Herter, Bogdanovich, Gallinari, Collins. That is probably the best 5-man offensive lineup in the NBA. And that's not hyperbole. It is perfectly spaced. The only other competition I'd say, as far as offensive spacing and movement, would be if Brooklyn did something like Kyrie, Dinwiddie, LeVert, Harris, and Durant. That'd be the only lineup that I'd say could combat this one. But I love what Atlanta did. They got defensive guards in Dunn and Rondo, which I think were very repetitive. They should have just brought in one of the two and used the other money elsewhere, but I really like their moves, and I'd say that they're probably the favorites for the 8 seed now. Yeah, that's really all I got for today, guys. I thought it would be a shorter video, but actually I ended up talking for a while, so hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting, and I will see you next time. Bye.